Hello, Local 304. Want to start off our weekly or so YouTube video this time with Local 304 attended the political conference in Washington, D.C. this week. So David Galvin, Chris Blazer, and I. A little different this year. Didn't have any workshops. Instead, we stayed in general session the entire time. It was called Focus for 2020. Very, very good. Lots of great speakers. Names that you're all familiar with came in and spoke. But I really want to highlight one that's not a name that we in Kansas are really familiar with, but Brian Fitzpatrick. So Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick out of Pennsylvania is a Republican. Came in and spoke to the conference. And what I found unique, which I didn't know this was happening, but there's a bipartisan caucus that happens in the House. And in order to be part of this caucus, if a Republican wants to join, he's got to reach across the aisle and get a Democrat. If a Democrat wants to join, he's got to reach across the aisle and get a Republican to join. And thanks to them, they've been responsible for a lot of the bills that we in labor support. The IBEW has written letters of support from as high up as Lonnie Stevenson for these. So a couple of them that I think you're probably aware of. The Butch-Lewis Pension Reform Act is one, with the multi-employer pensions struggling as much as they are, Central States being such a prime example of that this bill is meant to help shore those up. So, when we look at the recession and the aftermath that happened to corporations and banks and how the government bailed those out, why shouldn't we have that same look for pension plans? There's nothing nothing more tragic than working all your life in a defined pension plan, sacrificing your wages to go into that plan, and then at the time you're reaping those benefits, it goes away. And so the Butch-Lewis Act is a very important piece of legislation that has passed the House, thanks in part to that bipartisan caucus. The other big bill that also made it through the House is the PRO Act. And the PRO Act is one that stands for the, I just lost it, the organizing is what, organizing reform. And so that it looks at the NLRA, the act in itself, and how to shore that up, because we all know the foundation of the National Labor Relations Act was the promotion of unions. And we seem to be getting away from that more and more. We see these NLRB rulings that are going 180 degrees from that. So the PRO Act is something that's very, very important to us and will help stabilize the economy. So again, kudos to that caucus that's reaching across and finding the consensus to get those bills there, which is really what our democracy is all built on, right, is consensus. So what we also did during that time, with the help of 226 and 124, we went around and spoke to Senator Moran, and we spoke to a member of his staff, and we went through those bills like we're talking about, and also the infrastructure and green technology and those charging stations, and making sure that we're on the forefront of those for the electric vehicles. And so what we did is we talked to our representatives in the state of Kansas about these legislation being looked at a national level, and then how that directly affects us in Kansas. And so good conversations. I hope that they become fruitful. So I appreciate everybody that supported that political conference. A couple of speakers that we heard from also, in particular Lonnie Stevenson. And President Stevenson said a couple of things that really resonated with me in our diverse political environment that we live in here in Kansas, is that Democrats don't have an open checkbook. So in other words, the friends of labor are the friends of labor. It doesn't, Republican, we don't say you can't be a friend of labor. Democrats, you can't think that you're always a friend of labor. Instead, we support those that support us. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, it doesn't matter. And I think that's a pretty profound statement that we need to make sure that, I know we can all be in favor of our team, but when it comes to making sure that our needs are met as labor, that we're talking to our congressmen and senators and making sure they hear what's needed right here in Kansas, and what's important to grow our economy and make sure that our kids and our grandkids are going to have a good, stable economy right here in the state of Kansas. So really appreciate those statements and try to get past the divisiveness, and instead let's look out for what's best for us. So again, I felt it was a very successful conference, and I think that gives good insight into going into 2020 and trying not to be so partisan that we don't reach across the aisle and try to get things done for the right reasons. Switch gears a little bit. We Westar still working on our safety impact changes and the power delivery. I have a meeting next week, 19th, in order to look at the settlement agreement that we have on our issue there with the two-man hot crews and the boots and shirts and eyewear. And same thing going on in Generation. We had our first meeting with them and asked some questions and asked for some information. So we haven't held our second meeting yet. Again, the foundation for both power delivery and Generation is that status quo. You know, we have negotiations coming up, and until we get to that point, we should just keep things the way they are. You as a member shouldn't suffer any out-of-pocket expenses for those changes in the safety rules, and so that's our driving force, and I hope to be able to maintain that. Excuse me. Northrop Grumman reached a tentative agreement in their negotiations last week. And so we got the information out there on the floor, and they'll be holding their vote next Tuesday at the Super 8 Motel out there on South Topeka Boulevard. I think the polls open up about 4:30, and we'll shut it down at 6:45 because there are some extended hours going on out there. So please get out and vote. It is a 7.5-year agreement, no takeaways, and a nice economic package that averages out to more than what we usually negotiate individually in individual years. So again, please get out and exercise your right to vote. Westar, I also forgot to mention that we do have an issue going on with stickers, and so I've reached out to the company with the new logos being put on the trucks, that we do be able to maintain our prior method of having an IBEW sticker on those trucks too. So sure, you hear more information on that, but at this point, we're still raising the dispute on it. So, construction, we had a grievance and dispute with one of the contractors, and I think the end result was that we need to make sure that there's good communication. You know, sometimes the cell phones and the texting and stuff can get in the way of making sure that there's good, clear communication and expectation. So please make sure that whether you're a foreman or whether you're a journeyman lineman, that we keep our communications to the point that there's good expectation of what work I'm going to be performing and when. So sometimes things can get in the way of making sure that we all understand what our expectation is at the job site. So more to come on that, I'm sure. Line clearance, I got negotiations starting on December the 2nd, and so you're going to see Mark Nichols coming around the job sites. Get him in a union vehicle and get out there and start looking proposals. We're not getting very many proposals, if any, right now, and so this being another one of those years that with the increase in Lineco, we need to be looking at how's our contract look and how's it sizing up on the non-economic issues, and is there any working conditions that need to be addressed. So be looking for that, and membership applications will be available at the same time too. I know we got a lot of guys traveling. Sometimes that can really be a disruption to membership depending on if your dues is making it back or not, or if you're getting put on honorary withdrawal. I know in a couple of the previous videos we talked about the importance of maintaining your membership because of your health benefits, your Lineco, and that you should be ERTed in order for those benefits to follow you wherever you go. And so working in the right to work state like Kansas, you'll get your benefits, but you leave this state, go work in another state, your benefits may not follow you if you're not a dues paying member. So make sure you stay in touch with the office whenever you're traveling. Let's make sure that you are in fact ERTed so that your benefits are going to follow you, and if you need to get caught up on dues, we can make that happen. So be looking out for Mark, and make sure, again, you express your voice as a union member. That's the most important tool that you have in your tool bag. So keep up the good work, Local 304, and we will talk to you soon.